Hey guys, Henning and Morten from FlippedNormals here. In this episode, we're going to be talking about how you can improve your portfolio so that you have a better chance of getting a job in whatever field you want to. Your portfolio is probably the most important thing when it comes to getting the job. Like, take away personality, take away geography, take away all those things. I would say the most important thing is your portfolio. If it's not good enough, you are not getting an interview or getting the job. So we just can quickly be talking about some of our top tips for actually improving your portfolio. The first one is that you should build a portfolio around what you want your job to be. Which means if you want to be a modeler, you should spend all your time modeling. And you should only have modeling in your portfolio. At least the portfolio you're sending to the recruiters should contain modeling and show that you're very proficient at that. When it comes to universities, a lot of times they will just try to make you into a generalist and make you do all sorts of stuff. That when you're really supposed to be specializing, you're maybe doing animation, you're doing rigging, lighting, compositing. And all these things are really good to have an understanding of. Knowing the pipeline is amazing. But when you're actually shipping something off to the position where you want to have, you really should be tailoring your portfolio to that. This can just enhance your chance of being hired dramatically. I was just speaking to somebody now a few hours ago who said that this was possibly the biggest thing which had changed for him in the last few months, where he went from being fairly average to now having interviews at game studios. And the change here was he wanted to do characters for games. And then he stopped doing all sorts of random stuff which didn't impact it. If you just keep focusing on doing what you want to do, you can have a far, far better chance.
I think one of the easiest ones there was, I don't know the names, so I can't even name names, but I had a conversation with a student once, and we were talking about, it's like a crowd, we were talking about things, in my opinion, that were completely useless at universities. And one of those things was actually unrelated from portfolio pieces. It was the amount of curricular work, like writing work, like essays and that kind of stuff that you needed to do in universities, because obviously it's a degree. And he was like, no, I completely disagree and stuff. It's fine that you disagree, but it doesn't really matter what you think. It is completely irrelevant, So whether it's you want to be a modeler and you're focusing on animation, or you want to be a modeler and you're focusing your effort on essays, it's one of those things where you want to try and prioritize as much as possible.
Yeah, I've seen this before where I've been talking to students, particularly students in this case, where I've been asking, what do you want to be? Oh, I want to be a texture artist. Then why are you rigging now? Why are you animating now? It's such a waste of your time and effort, and time is way more valuable than people assume it is.
I think it's one of the hard things, especially when you're in university, because you should definitely go through a few of these curriculums where you do a little bit of animation, you figure out, okay, is it for me? Yes or no. You do some rigging, okay, so you figure out what part of the pipeline is it, and how does it tie into what you want to do, let's say specifically for modeling. But trying to split your efforts in a portfolio where you do, even if you want to be a generalist, I would still advocate for trying to be a generalist, but within like an area. So like if you want to be a generalist, then maybe you aim for modeling, texturing and shading. Within that you're a generalist. Like going from modeling, programming, animation, rigging, I don't think that makes a very good generalist, because that's very specialized sort of like scopes within one.
And the generalists who are fantastic at those areas, and there are some, they're more like 10-year seniors who just spend time developing those skills. Yeah. Like if you try to learn Houdini and then Katana and then modeling and all sorts of stuff in ZBrush and Mari and Substance, you are just not going to be able to do it.
No. And the problem is you're just not going to be as good as the person who just did one thing. That you're going to have a hard time competing against that. Now, that being said, there's definitely a spot out there for a lot of generalists, especially when you move into the smaller companies. The more of these skills that you have, the better. But again, I would restrict it into what's close in the pipeline.
Yeah, I've seen this a fair few times where instead of being good at all these things, they just become bad at all these things. It's like you had 100 skill points and you put 1 into 100 things. You really don't want that. You want to be at a certain level in all the areas you are presenting to the studio. Like, I really can't stress how important it is to make a more specialized portfolio for your application. And it also makes it so much easier for the recruitment studio, which is looking at your stuff and being like, clearly this person can do this. Like, if you're looking at Andrew's portfolio here, as a friend of mine who we worked together at NPCs many years ago, if you were to look at his portfolio, there isn't any doubt what he can do. Like, no. He's amazing in spaceships and hard surface and designs in hard surface, whatever it might be, robotics. If you look at this stuff, you know where to place him.
And if you want a Santa Christmas Chronicles, it's also good for that.
It's also really good for that. So be focused in your efforts. So if we're just looking at it, it's just well presented and it just looks really, really nice.
Yeah, and I think that really takes us on to point number 2 here, which is take it seriously. When you present something, you should present it as, this is the best I can do. Like I've seen it a fair few times with portfolios being presented where they're like, should I do my best stuff first or best stuff at the end? Like, what do I get the attention with? Well, only put your best stuff in there.
Yeah.
But it's like, oh, I only have one best piece. Well, then you need to spend some more time making more best pieces.
Yeah.
What in your portfolio should be 100% representable? Yeah. I think that's the word.
That's a good word.
Yeah, of your skill level, of what you can do. So having a piece in there that you completed a month ago and one that you completed 4 years ago just to make up for the quantity, I don't think is a good idea.
Yeah, assume that the head of modeling or the head of department at the studio you are applying for will review your work with a lot of supervisors.
Yeah.
And if you're being like, if your opinion now is, oh yeah, but it's really old, therefore the excuses, that is going to put you in a really uncomfortable situation if you get to interview, or if you don't get to interview, that's probably why.
Yeah, it's like, it's actually an interesting one. Why do you have this in there? It's really old. Yeah, why do you have it in there?
Exactly. So I think it's so important that you present your work well. I mean, now all your piece is done and it's the best piece ever. If Andrew here were to just show screen grabs from Maya and that's it, it would still be an awesome piece because it's a phenomenal model. But by really doing the nice renders of it, it just looks way better.
Yeah.
And you don't even have to be fancy here. You could just learn some basic lighting, or you could take it into Keyshot, or you can use one of our products, which is the FlippedNormals Lighting Scenes. This is something we developed for this exact purpose. You just drag and drop your model into this kit, and you hit render, and you have something really nice.
Yeah. So it's one of those areas where. I think this is the first, we saw this before, I think it was Mike Nash, probably, who had a lighting scene as well. And then we did ours many, many years ago. And I think the nice thing about something specifically like a lighting scene is that, let's say you're a texture artist, you're just texturing someone else's model. Maybe you don't want, again, to spend the time learning to do nice lighting. So finding these kinds of things that can speed it up for you, I think is definitely worth it.
So regardless of using ours or not, I mean, the point is just make the presentation as good as you can. Be it for a show reel or if you're using ArtStation, honestly, whatever it is, spend proper time on it. I really recommend that you learn at least the basics of lighting. Like, you don't have to learn how to do proper photographic exposure in integrating something into a shot, but just make something which looks nice, do some basic shaders on it, and just present it in a nice and proper way.
Yeah, I mean, throw it into Blender and like use Eevee or something.
Yeah,
super quick, real time. So it's for some areas I think it's worth spending a little bit of time, not specializing in it, but just getting up to a certain level so you can present it well. Yeah, it's the same thing with Photoshop. Being able to use Photoshop to an extent where you can edit and manipulate your pictures just so it looks a little bit better. Yeah,
for every single render you're doing, you should take them into Photoshop and at the bare minimum do brightness contrast.
Yeah.
For every single piece, it's going to look 100% better.
We're definitely doing a tutorial on this.
Yeah, we're gonna do a few just showing how you can improve it.
Like it's hard to say all of my newer pieces because I've only done 2 in the last 4 years. But basically everything I do, and I've done for many, many years, it's like you render something out of 3D. Or like you do a concept piece, you paint something. and then you just throw a little bit of color balance on there, levels or brightness, and all of a sudden you start to question everything you just did. You're like, wait, this looks way nicer than it did before.
I spent 3 weeks on it in 3D and then it looks 20% better by one grade node.
Yeah, exactly.
It's infuriating. Yeah, incredibly important. So here we have an actual example. This is from our one of our most recent streetwear outfit in Marvelous Designer. And this here is a good example of straight from 3D render versus some post work. What you're seeing now is with some post work in Photoshop on top. And then we take it off and you can see what it looks like from render.
Yeah, so it's interesting looking at the render before, like when you compare it, look how much greener it is. There's a lot of green in there. It's kind of dull, but I think one of the main, like the main things that has changed here is the face. It's just the makeup that's been applied to the face. So it's like, it's still within the realm of, okay, it still looks like the render, but it's just been touched up a little bit. And this is the kind of stuff I think can take your pieces to the next level.
And even if you don't do this much, where you're actually painting in just some, like you have some adjustment layers here, like the color lookup, some levels, brightness, contrast, just really, really simple things can just make such a big difference.
Yeah, I mean, if you take, let's say this was the final piece and you just took off these two color balance and the levels, right? Already makes it pop a lot more. It's just a little tweak where we add in some blues, add in some reds. The color lookup 3D strip just adds a lot of saturation to your pieces, and then just crank it a little bit in, crunch the whites and the blacks just a tiny bit. Just add a little more range to it.
The reason you want to do this is because the competition around you is so huge. So if you can make all your pieces, every single thing which is rendered, just 10% better, you are just in for, then your portfolio looks 10% bebetter.
Yeah.
Sure, there might be a good modeler is gonna, it's hopefully not gonna be fooled by this. If the head of an department is looking at this and be like, great, that's a bit nicer. But it's just a bit smoother. Everything is just a bit smoother, where it's just easier to get it. If your stuff just looks a little bit better than all your competitors, you just have a tiny bit chance better.
It might be that one thing that really catches their eye or something. Yeah. They're like, oh, okay, this looks nice. They don't really know why, but maybe you put in a little more contrast in your thumbnail.
And it might not even be that it's that the piece itself looks so much better, but it just shows that you treat your work with methodical care.
Yeah.
That your work is well presented and it just looks proper. It just shows that you're a proper production artist and you can be used in a production. Because one thing you do a lot is, for instance, with specific these kind of screen grabs, is you'll present your work a lot to supervisors.
Like this.
Especially
if you're a modeler, ZBrush screen grabs all day.
Yeah, you're not going to take this out and render it because it takes too much time.
Yeah.
So if they already know that you can present your work, that's just, it's just 1% more for your application in your favor.
Whereas if the only thing you had from this was a Maya screenshot, they'd be like, I mean, maybe it's nice, but this just, objectively looks nicer. Yeah,
it's just a lot easier also for people to, within the studio, to share your work as well. If you let's say you make your entire portfolio as one ArtStation project, like let's say this page here is your entire portfolio, they can now just scroll up and down and very easily see all your work. But if this is scattered over 5 different websites, maybe there is some stuff which is password protected and it's just very hard to evaluate your work, that just counts against you.
Yeah.
It's so important that this is done right. And then tip number 3 here is get good and honest feedback from professionals. It's important that these people are professionals and not your fellow students, because you want somebody who is better than you. If you get feedback from somebody who's at the same level, that might be helpful, of course. It might push them to another level, but you really want honest feedback from somebody who has been doing this for a few years.
And like we've talked about before, and I know some people do get offended by this, but I don't know what else to tell you. Don't get feedback from your mom or your dad. It doesn't. Yeah, maybe they're good at what they do, but reality is, even if they're like a modeler at ILM or whatever, most of the time it's a family member or if it's a friend, they're most likely not going to give you 100% honest feedback because there's always this emotional element in it. If you can get feedback from professionals that don't really know you, have nothing to do with you, but it is in their interest to see you improve, I personally believe they will give you the best feedback you can get.
I really think so too. This also ties into point 1 as well, that maybe the feedback isn't necessarily, oh, move the clavicle a bit up and move that down, but it could also be this piece here is completely irrelevant for what you're doing. So the piece you're doing right now might just be completely irrelevant for your portfolio. So let's say we keep using the example a lot, you want to be a character modeler and you're now working on a car. You're like, all right, cool. Is it a character? No, it's a car. Don't do it then.
Yeah.
Like there are just things which they can just push you in a direction. This is what I do a lot when I'm giving feedback. I don't really have a whole lot of time to give very specific feedback where you're doing paint overs and move with the nasal label full 2 millimeters, but it's more, this is the direction you should go. And you should read this book, watch this tutorial, observe these kind of things.
Yeah.
That kind of feedback can be the most valuable there is, because I'm most likely able to do a lot of the very specific changes myself if I understand what you mean.
Yeah, and because there's definitely both good and bad feedback. Let me take me as a perfect example. Me being 18 years old and a complete douchebag.
Oh no.
I think it was around 18, and I just did Scott Eden's anatomy course, and it's so cringe. But after having completed Scott Eden's anatomy course, you think you're an actual god, like a literal anatomy god, and you feel like a god. And then you scroll through other people's stuff, and this is on a forum that I'm not going to name, but it's definitely out there. So if you can find it, good luck. And you go like, I'm going to feedback the shit out of this because now you know. But what you don't really know is that you don't know how to give feedback. So what you start doing, you don't have that overview of how to give feedback. So exactly like Henning says, then you start going into details like your nasal labial fold should be moved 2 millimeters to the right instead of like as an overall thing. Maybe look at the pecs and the ratio between the abs and stuff. Like other than that, looks cool, but that can also happen.
It might, yeah, just theoretically.
All right, yeah.
Just purely theoretically. But it might also be that this feedback here isn't helpful.
Yeah.
The feedback you should be getting is stuff which is genuinely helpful. And this is really hard. And we're definitely going to make a separate video on giving and receiving feedback. But if you just get a list which is fix all these kind of things, maybe the piece is still rubbish afterwards because maybe the gesture is wrong or it's an extremely poor taste and all that. So you really don't want to listen to all the feedback you're getting. You want to have a specific goal, and you want to listen to people and listen to feedback which helps you reach that very specific goal.
Yeah, like because you can very easily, even from professionals and stuff, that maybe they haven't given a lot of feedback. Maybe the feedback that they end up giving you is also wrong. They end up giving you a list of, move the little toe on his right foot up a little bit instead of looking at it as an overall piece and how it can help you generally improve. Like you're not going to learn a lot from someone saying the little toe is a little off. No. That's not like, that's just a very specific thing. Okay, move it there. Okay, I guess you'll remember. Whereas if it's more like, play around with the color grading. Maybe look at this book when it comes to light and color and try to implement that in your workflow. Okay, that's a bunch more information that you can implement.
I've also given feedback to people as well. Like, so I used to be a modeler and not a lighter. But sometimes I give lighting feedback to people because my feedback is a lot better than nothing. But then this student has now got lighting feedback from a real lighter, and they're asking me like, should I listen to you or them? And I'm like, 100% listen to them. Like, what I said is probably not wrong, but what they said is a lot more correct.
Yeah.
So find people who you can trust, also within the field as well. If you were to look at the lighters, if you want to show a piece of lighting to 100 different lighters, you're going to get 100 different responses. Mm-hmm. And if you were to listen to all of them, you would just dilute it to the point where either it would be completely black or completely white, where you lose all the sense of interest in the piece.
Yeah.
So really make sure that you get good and honest feedback from professionals.
And on to point number 4, which is, this might seem obvious, but we've just encountered this so many times that we have to talk about it. It's like displaying your contact information proud and loudly, or whatever. It's like so many times actually when we've gone to ArtStation contacting people or tried to contact people before they implemented the whole messages system, it's like a lot of artists don't have their emails on there. I don't know if it's for privacy or for whatever, but if you want to get hired for anything, even for people sending out their show reels, no emails in the show reel, no email in the description, you're not going to get contacted. Because then the person who's going to contact you has to do so much digging in order to find your details that it's worth for them to just skip you and go on to the next person.
Yeah, I've done this before where I didn't contact somebody because it would have taken 10 minutes more to contact them. And it's not that, oh, you're lazy. No, it's because you maybe have 200 people to contact.
Yeah.
You just don't have that time. And also, like you mentioned here, like, yeah, I can contact somebody in ArtStation, but the recruiters, they don't necessarily have ArtStation.
No.
Because they're not really in the art field.
Yeah.
And they have so many applicants that unless you're an absolute superstar, they're not really going to take the extra step to contact you. So, but it's super simple. Display your full name. If you have 7 middle names, you don't necessarily, but display your real name and an email.
Yeah.
Keep it very simple, and also keep that professional as well. Don't go like Monster Hunter 42X. Like, just
unless you worked on Monster Hunter
or
something. I don't know.
Exactly. Like, don't use Forbidden Hope.
And the last point here is cheat. So this kind of ties into, sounds weird just saying it, but cheat.
Cheat as much as you can.
Yeah, this kind of ties into what we showed you before in Photoshop. So we'll just bring up this example again. So if we just zoom in on her face a little bit here, this is now her face. This was her face. So just from straight out of the render, this is what it looked like. And then with the lighting and stuff, it could just be improved. So you just go over and do a paint over. Now, for our purposes, this works fine. This is not a production piece. This isn't going to go into shot. This is the finished shot. It's kind of like an illustration. So here it just made more sense to just tweak it in post. And this is the case a lot of the time.
I've seen this so often where you have people who, they don't really want to do post work on top of the work, even though there is a whole field called compositing, which is that's what they're doing, because, oh, that's cheating. No, you're in a computer. You are cheating. Just if you want to have a computer render like this, take it in and do some extra painting on it. It's totally fine. Like, don't be deceptive. Like, don't Photoshop. Like, take Sigourney Weaver's hair and Photoshop it on top of it and say you have a full groom on it. That's deceptive. But if you want to make it look nicer, really do that. Another example here is that, let's say you want to show a model and you want to really present this nice with textures. You don't have to model and texture this from all angles. You can early on select the angles you want this to be rendered from, and then just do that. Let's say you're matching. You want to do like a car, and you want to match that to some photos, and you're showing that in your reel that, hey, see, it matches really well. You take 3 angles, you match it really well to those angles, and the rest you don't really worry about. Of course, it shouldn't be way off. You shouldn't have like an extra windshield or something. But you really don't have to make it a proper production asset. If you're doing a modeling reel, you aren't actually doing models for production. You're making the illusions of making models for production.
Obviously, you should have the skill to make it a production model as well. But if you can get to that point, then I think that should be fine.
Yeah, 100%. Because as long as it presents it in that way, like you're doing a series of shots. You're not exporting out a model to be used for anything practical. Apart from that, the final result for your reel in this case is your reel or is your portfolio. So make those look as good as they can.
Yeah, okay, so here's an interesting example. We were working on Pacific Rim Uprising. We had the Mega Kaiju. The Mega Kaiju comes in the scene like with its foot. This is like I don't know, how tall was it? Like 100 meters tall, 300 feet. I think something like that. I think
it was 300 meters. It was like 1,000 feet.
Jesus,
yeah, it's the size of a building.
And then like the foot comes down in person view, right? And you have a person, and the foot itself is like 6, 7, 8 meters tall. And obviously we've detailed that and stuff. And I think, yeah, you were doing all the sculpting for that. Were you doing the textures?
I was doing all the texturing for Mega Kaiju.
And it's like, you take it up to the level where it works in most shots. Just happens to be that shot where it's super close up. Obviously, you can't make it so that shot holds up super close up. So what do? Well, you send it to matte painting. And then you have a 3D mask on top, and they matte paint on top of it for the shot. So that it looks like, okay, this was all done in 3D and it is all like real. But it's not, it's a cheat. And that's the reality of working in production.
It's very painful to do it for matte painting, but those guys knocked it out of the park.
Obviously, worked a little differently for games sometimes, but even games cheat. You have stuff in the background, mountains and clouds. Oh, it's a skybox. It's not actual mountains that's been modeled with trees on there. It just gives the illusion of detail.
Yeah, and this is not, again, it's super important that we get this across. This is not so that you should be deceptive.
No.
But this is so that you only have so much time. Let's say you have 500 hours to make your entire portfolio. If you now spend time on modeling something which you shouldn't have to, or in this case here for the eyes, you would set up some crazy light linking, and you do spend 10 extra hours really getting the textures right for the face, and you could totally you can get 100% this result in 3D out of render. But why would you do that? Maybe it takes you 10 hours and it takes you 2 hours to do it here.
Guess what? The highlight for the eye, that's just one stroke in Photoshop.
Yeah, exactly.
You go, boop, boop.
You would probably spend some time just setting it up. You would have to set up like a little disc which is radiating. So it's just that you simply just don't have time to do all of this in if you're going to do it properly, in big quotation marks here. So yeah, that's essentially our list of stuff to help you improve. This is really, I think, in order of importance. Like, first one is just really, the most important is make a portfolio which people want to see. Figure out what you want to do, and then build that. And everything else is more like, present your work well, of course, and have your email, but that's really figure out what you want to do, and then you can go from there.
Yeah.
So if you want to see more videos like this in the future, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and turn on notifications. You'll get notified every time we upload a new episode.
Thanks for watching.